continuing our study of the seminar of Jacques Lacan, Book 1, Freud's Papers on Technique, 1953 to 1954. This time we will resume our study of Chapter 7, the topic of the imaginary. Last time we talked in detail about Lacanian theory and its definition of the three registers and the mirror stage. You can go back and watch that video if you need a refresher. I want to begin this lesson with a curious comment that Lacan makes on page 73. He says, quote, "One of the things we must guard against," and here he is talking about what psychoanalysts must guard against in the psychoanalytic treatment, is to understand too much, to understand more than what is in the discourse of the subject. To interpret and to imagine one understands are not at all the same things. It is precisely the opposite, to interpret and to imagine one understands. I would go as far as to say, Lacan says, that it's on the basis of a kind of refusal of understanding that we push open the door to analytic understanding." End quote. What Lacan is pointing towards here is the fact that when an analyst presumes to know too much about the patient, he makes inaccurate judgments about the direction of the treatment. It's best, Lacan thinks, not to dig deeply into the meaning of a patient's statement, for example. The analyst can't presume to know the meaning. But what the analyst can do is to highlight certain ways in which even the surface level understanding of what the patient says can have multiple valences. The point is not to interfere too much in what the process can reveal of its own accord. Psychoanalysis is the study of a particular subject, a particular person, and as such it will not proceed according to some presumed formula, Lacan thinks. When Lacan uses psychoanalyst Melanie Klein as a case study in this chapter, it's to warn analysts through what Klein did about what it looks like when an analyst imposes his or her understanding and interpretation onto a case. He thinks psychoanalyst Melanie Klein imposed too much during her sessions. According to Lacan, with Klein's analysis of one child, she tried to get the child caught up in an understanding of himself as involved in the Oedipus complex, and the child didn't even have a fully articulate language to himself, Lacan argues. According to Lacan, on page 85, the unconscious is already the discourse of the other. He puts that phrase in italics, or actually the translator Jacques-Alain Miller put it in italics, so it must be significant. It seems to mean, this phrase, the unconscious is already the discourse of the other, that our original unconscious is what is imposed from without. In what we see with Melanie Klein's case, Lacan thinks, is what the imposition from an authority figure looks like in real time. Lacan says on page 85, quote, "It is Melanie Klein's discourse which brutally grafts the primary symbolizations of the Oedipal situation onto the initial ego-related inertia of the child." Lacan goes on to say, Melanie Klein always does that with her subjects, more or less implicitly and more or less arbitrarily. End quote. Contrary to popular opinion, imposing an interpretation onto a patient is anathema to the treatment. Lacan says on page 86, quote, "Development only takes place insofar as the subject integrates himself into the symbolic system, acts within it, asserts himself in it through the use of genuine speech. It isn't even essential," Lacan says, "that the speech be his own." Now, that's an obscure remark, but we will have more time to explore it in upcoming sessions. Lacan is trying to say, though, that the goal is not for the analyst to understand the patient per se, but for the therapeutic process to allow the patients to understand themselves. Let's stop there. Thank you for listening.